When The Undertaker and Batista went to war, when Jeff Hardy finally reached the top, when Edge and Vickie Guerrero were the most hated couple on Earth, when Jericho unmasked Rey Mysterio and Kane buried his brother, when Edge cashed in on the Deadman and was chokeslammed to hell for his sins. And these are just some of the moments that defined SmackDown's golden age, when the blue brand had a unique identity, a stacked roster, and some of the best storylines in wrestling history. But what exactly made SmackDown during this period so fun? What were the feuds, matches, and moments that defined this era? And who were the stars that made the blue brand more exciting than Raw every week? Let's take a trip down memory lane and answer all those questions as we revisit the greatest era in SmackDown history. Our story begins at the 2007 Royal Rumble. Going into the year, Batista ruled SmackDown as the monster champion who felt like an unstoppable force. But at the Royal Rumble, things would be set in motion for the unstoppable force to meet the immovable object. On January 27, 2007, The Undertaker won the Royal Rumble, the one achievement that had eluded him for his entire career. He then stood face-to-face with all three of WWE's world champions, looked each of them in the eye, and made his choice. He chokeslammed Batista in the center of the ring, and their match was set for WrestleMania 23. The weeks leading up to WrestleMania built the match perfectly. The two were forced to coexist in tag team matches, and that uneasy alliance started cracking. What started as a rivalry built on respect had become something far more personal by the time they reached No Way Out, when a spinebuster by Batista cost the team their match against Cena and HBK. Neither man could stand sharing the spotlight with the other any longer. At WrestleMania 23, in front of a packed Ford Field in Detroit, they finally settled it one-on-one. Batista opened with aggression, aiming for a quick win, but The Undertaker recovered fast and reminded the animal why WrestleMania was his yard. Back and forth they went, big move after big move. And after almost 20 minutes of powerbombs and chokeslams, the streak claimed its 15th victim and the World Heavyweight Championship was going home with the Deadman. But Batista wasn't done. He demanded his rematch and got it at Backlash in a last man standing match. Both men pushed each other to the absolute limit until a spear by Batista sent both men crashing off the stage. Neither could answer the 10 count. The match was ruled a draw and the title stayed with Undertaker. They ran it back one more time, this time inside a steel cage on an episode of SmackDown. Both men escaped the cage at the same time, and Undertaker was again declared the champion. But what happened next changed everything. Mark Henry stormed the ring and demolished the already battered Undertaker. And while officials scrambled to restore order, a very familiar entrance theme hit. Edge walked down the ramp carrying his Money in the Bank briefcase and seized the opportunity. He handed the briefcase over, the bell rang, and just like that, The Undertaker's title reign was over. The ultimate opportunist had once again struck and stole the big gold. The Undertaker and Batista feud had delivered some of the most brutal matches in years, but Edge had ended it without throwing a single punch. The Deadman was hungry for revenge, but Edge had a wild card up his sleeve. Edge's first World Heavyweight Championship reign was short. He vacated the title shortly afterward due to injury, and the title went back to Batista after he defeated the Great Khali. In the meantime, the Deadman made his return and got revenge on Mark Henry, before setting his sights back on the world title and Batista. While all this was happening on TV, Edge spent his time away building alliances, getting closer to SmackDown general manager Vickie Guerrero, and positioning himself to strike again. When he returned at the 2007 Survivor Series, he was ready to execute his master plan. He came back disguised as a cameraman during The Undertaker and Batista's Hell in a Cell match and smashed The Undertaker across the skull with the camera, costing him both the match and the title. At Armageddon, with help from Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder, Edge defeated Undertaker and Batista in a triple threat match to become World Heavyweight Champion for the second time. He had now cost The Undertaker the title 3 times without ever having beaten him clean, and everyone knew that vengeance was coming. Undertaker won an Elimination Chamber match at No Way Out 2008 to earn his shot, and the two finally met at WrestleMania 24 in the main event. Edge brought his whole La Familia stable with him, but it still wasn't enough. The Undertaker defeated Edge to win the World Heavyweight Championship, extending the streak to 16 wins. The Deadman had finally gotten his hands on the man who had been running circles around him for the better part of a year, but the story wasn't over. In fact, it was just getting started. Undertaker won a rematch against Edge at Backlash, but Vickie Guerrero stripped him of the title and banned his submission hold, calling it dangerous. The title was declared vacant. At Judgment Day, Undertaker won by countout, but championships can't change hands on a countout, so the belt remained in limbo. Vickie then made a TLC match for the vacant championship at One Night Stand, with the stipulation that if The Undertaker lost, he would be banned from WWE entirely. During the match, La Familia showed up in full force. The Undertaker fought through all of them, putting Hawkins and Ryder through tables, hitting a last ride on Edge off the ladder through 2 more tables. But the numbers game was too much. Edge recovered, pushed the ladder over, and sent Undertaker crashing through 4 tables on the outside before he retrieved the championship. Edge was back on top again. The Undertaker was gone, or so it seemed. The rated R superstar got too cocky and made the mistake of cheating on Vickie Guerrero. When she found out, she did the one thing Edge feared most. She reinstated The Undertaker and booked them in a Hell in a Cell match at SummerSlam. Edge, panicking, sat down with Mick Foley on the cutting edge and asked for advice on how to survive the Devil's Playground against the Deadman. Foley told him he needed to rediscover his inner monster. Edge claimed he understood, then viciously attacked Foley to prove the point. At SummerSlam, despite Edge's best efforts, The Undertaker made him pay, and after the match, chokeslammed him off a ladder through the canvas of the ring itself, with fire erupting from below. Edge was symbolically sent to hell. The rivalry was over, and The Undertaker had finally gotten the last word. From the cash-in to the cameraman disguise to the TLC match to Hell in a Cell, The Undertaker and Edge spent over a year producing one of the most creative and personal feuds SmackDown has ever seen. And just as that chapter closed, a new one was already beginning on the same brand. While The Undertaker and Edge were tearing each other apart, a certain charismatic enigma was slowly rising to the top. Jeff Hardy had been one of the most popular performers on the roster for years, but the WWE Championship had always felt just out of reach. Hardy was drafted from Raw to SmackDown in June 2008 as part of the annual draft. The Blue Brand's audience latched onto him immediately, and WWE started listening. He became one of the faces of the SmackDown brand and was clearly the people's choice going into the second half of 2008. But the road to the top wasn't smooth. Hardy challenged for the WWE Championship at No Mercy and Cyber Sunday, but came up short both times. Then came Survivor Series, where it looked like his moment had finally arrived. He had earned a spot in the title match, and the crowd was ready to watch him win. But on the day of the show, Hardy was found unconscious in a hotel stairwell in Boston. Edge took his place, won the title, and Hardy was once again left on the outside looking in. The crowd reactions for Jeff kept getting louder, and years of sacrifice, years of risking his body for the fans, years of chasing a dream finally reached its conclusion when Jeff faced Edge and Triple H in a triple threat at Armageddon. During the match, Triple H hit a pedigree on Edge, then Hardy followed immediately with a swanton bomb from the top rope. Hardy got the pin, and just like that, the lifelong dream was real. But the celebration didn't last long. At the Royal Rumble, Hardy lost the WWE Championship back to Edge when his brother Matt turned on him, hitting him with a steel chair. Years of jealousy, years of watching his younger brother get all the glory while he scraped for scraps had forced Matt to join the dark side. Their resulting feud consumed the first months of 2009, playing out across WrestleMania and Backlash before Jeff finally made Matt say, "I quit." But the charismatic enigma wasn't done chasing gold. After finishing things with Matt, he won a ladder match against Edge at Extreme Rules to capture his first World Heavyweight Championship. He had now held both world titles and climbed to the very top of the pro wrestling mountain. But then, before he could even catch his breath, it all came crashing down. CM Punk had won the Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania 25 and had been waiting patiently for the right moment. When Hardy climbed down from the ladder at Extreme Rules, beaten up and exhausted, Punk decided that moment had arrived. He cashed in, hit the GTS twice on a barely standing Hardy, and walked out as champion. What followed was the most personal feud SmackDown produced during this entire era. The contrast between their personas made for an interesting dynamic. The self-righteous, clean-living villain clashed with the fallible hero who had a documented history battling addiction. Punk used this against Hardy constantly, berating him about his past and calling him a bad example. Hardy fought back and recaptured the title at Night of Champions, but Punk then won it back at SummerSlam in a tables, ladders, and chairs match. 5 days later, the feud reached its end. Hardy invoked his rematch clause and the two met in a steel cage match on SmackDown, with the stipulation that the loser had to leave WWE. In the end, Punk jabbed his thumbs into Hardy's eyes and dropped to the floor outside to retain the championship and drive Hardy out of the company for good. Kids in the arena were crying. Fans watching at home were furious. Jeff Hardy's run on SmackDown, one of the most emotionally connecting stories wrestling had ever seen, ended not with a triumphant send-off, but with a cold, calculated dismissal by a man who had outsmarted him at every turn. The backstage story was that Hardy needed time away from the company, and WWE chose not to renew his contract when it expired shortly after. He left as one of the biggest what-ifs of the era, a guy who, with a cleaner run, could have been the defining face of SmackDown for years. CM Punk, meanwhile, walked out of the feud as the most compelling villain on the brand, and with Hardy gone, SmackDown needed a new hero to step up to Punk. With Hardy gone and CM Punk firmly entrenched as the top villain on SmackDown, Rey Mysterio would get involved in a deeply personal feud with Punk and his straight edge society. But before that, Rey had to fight another veteran who didn't just want to win, but also wanted to steal Rey's mask. Mysterio won the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 25 by defeating JBL in 21 seconds, then was drafted back to SmackDown shortly after. Chris Jericho, who had also arrived on the brand, immediately set his sights on the title and on Mysterio personally. He called Mysterio a coward who hid behind a mask. In his autobiography, Jericho revealed that Vince McMahon initially dismissed the mask angle, telling him nobody cares about the mask. Jericho pushed back, explaining the deep cultural significance of a luchador's mask, the identity, the family legacy, the dignity it represented, and convinced Vince to let them run with it. Their first match at Judgment Day saw Mysterio defend his title successfully, landing the 619 after Jericho's own anger caused him to crash headfirst into the ring post. At Extreme Rules, Jericho caught Mysterio going for the 619, yanked the mask off his face, and got a quick cover on a stunned and exposed Rey to win the Intercontinental Championship for a record 9th time. He paraded the mask around SmackDown like a trophy the following weeks, maximizing every bit of humiliation he could squeeze out of the moment. Mysterio responded by putting his mask on the line in a title versus mask match at the Bash. Jericho ripped the mask off mid-match and held it high, only to discover that Mysterio was wearing a second mask underneath. The distraction gave Rey the opening he needed, and the 619 connected to win back the Intercontinental Championship. It was one of the cleverest finishes SmackDown had produced in years, and it landed perfectly because of how carefully the story had been built. Each match in the series built on the last. That's the kind of storytelling you rarely see in the WWE today. Mysterio retained the title one final time against Jericho on SmackDown in July to end the feud. After that, he moved on to a brief but heated feud against CM Punk and his straight edge society that also featured a young Dominic Mysterio. But while stars like Punk, Hardy, Edge, Taker, and Batista dominated the top of the card, the blue brand had an equally strong undercard that often stole the show. One of the things that separated this era of SmackDown from everything else was the sheer volume of quality across the entire card. Before Batista and Edge even entered the picture in 2007, The Undertaker had already been dealing with a pest in Mr. Kennedy. The two had been feuding since late 2006, and it escalated quickly. At Survivor Series 2006, Kennedy defeated The Undertaker in a first blood match. The Deadman got his revenge at Armageddon in a last ride match that was even more brutal than their first encounter. The Brothers of Destruction had their moments too, reuniting periodically to remind SmackDown who the most dangerous team on the roster was. In late 2006, The Undertaker and Kane teamed up to dismantle Mr. Kennedy and MVP. As the years went on, the midcard kept getting stronger with future world champions like Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre joining the blue brand. Cody Rhodes arrived as part of Legacy on Raw, but found his footing on SmackDown, where he debuted a new narcissistic character called Dashing Cody Rhodes. The gimmick eventually led to him getting his nose broken by Rey Mysterio's knee brace, turning him into the masked, embittered, undashing Cody. Also, at the inaugural Bragging Rights pay-per-view in October 2009, Team SmackDown, captained by Chris Jericho, defeated Team Raw to take home the trophy. It was a fitting victory for a brand that had, over the previous 3 years, delivered some of the finest television in WWE, 2 world-class main event feuds in The Undertaker's battles with Batista and Edge, a generation-defining title run, and heartbreaking exit from Jeff Hardy, the most compelling villain SmackDown had seen in years in CM Punk. The most creative mid-card feud of the era in Jericho vs. Mysterio. From 2007 to 2009, these men carried SmackDown through its golden age, and it was the best show in wrestling.